فتوح الآلفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين وانفعنا بالقرآن والذكر الحكيم. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا بما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا وأصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. وبعد قال الإمام حجة الإسلام الغزالي رحمه الله ونفعنا به وبكم. Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah is talking about the concept of tawakkul, or trusting, putting your reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's trying to guide us to a next level. When someone has gone through the stages of Tawbah, going against one's nafs, against shaitan, stopping oneself from doing haram, secluding oneself from bad company, and done all of these things and taken, orientating oneself away from the love of the world and towards the akhirah. When someone has gone through these stages, then Imam al-Ghazali is saying you need to go on to the stage of tawakkul. You need to go to the stage of tawakkul. So we have nothing to hear. وبلغنا أن النباشا تاب على يدي أبي يزيد البسطامي رحمه الله. This is a story. There was a grave robber who repented at the hands of Abu Yazid al-Bistami. Back in the days, you used to have these people called grave robbers, Nabash. They used to dig up, when someone was buried, they used to dig up the grave and steal the coffin and things like that. Anything that might be valuable. Not much really, but normally it's just like the coffin, but it could be valuable, the cloth. So they were called Nabash. I don't think we have them much nowadays, do we?
Still back home.
You still have them?
The Hindus one. They go for the Hindus one, yeah, because they bury gold.
They burn them, don't they?
Sorry?
They burn, don't they?
But sometimes when they didn't have money to burn them, they bury them first. Later on they save some money and then they burn it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they put gold and...
Oh, they put gold in
yeah.
it. So people do that.
Yeah.
At least the grave robbers, at least on purpose, comes to that gold, doesn't it? The grave robbers take it.
Anyway, this grave robber, he repented. Because it's sinful to dig up someone's grave and take their cup and things like that. فسأل أبو يزيد عن حاله. Abu Yazid asked him about his state. فقال نبشت ألف قبر فلم أرى وجوهه من القبلة إلا رجلين. The grave robber, he said, I robbed 1,000 graves. I saw none of their faces was facing the Qibla except for two people. Because normally when a Muslim is buried, their faces turn towards Qibla. But he said, when I dug these graves, I found that the people were turned away from the Qibla, except for two. فقال أبو يزيد مساكين أولئك تهمة الرزق حولت وجوههم عن القبلة. So Abu Yazid said those poor people, poor meaning not poor literally poor, but poor meaning, unfortunate. It was their not having the trust in their rizq, that has turned their faces away from the Qibla. وذكر بعض أصحابنا أنه رأى رجلا من أهل الصلاح فسأل عن حاله. Imam al-Ghazali said, one of my companions, one of my friends, could be student, could be, someone he knows, he saw a man, a righteous man, and asked about his state. Meaning, he saw someone who had died in his dream, I assume. فقال هل سلمت بإيمانك? So he asked this man, have you been saved with your iman? فقال إنما يسلم الإيمان للمتوكلين. So the man replied to him, only the faith of the people, the mutawakkilin, the people who have trust in Allah, is safe. نسأل الله أن يصلحنا بفضله ولا يؤاخذنا بما نحن أهله. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He rectifies us through His generosity, and He does not take us to account for what we deserve to be taken to account. إنه أرحم الراحمين فهذه هذه. You see, very often in this book, Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah makes these du'as. It's very important. It's indicating to us at all times, despite knowing all of this and learning all of this, our rectification is not in our hands. We have to continuously turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rectify us, to purify us, because if He doesn't give us that tawfiq, then we cannot achieve anything of this. So that's the key. The key to purifying and to rectifying ourselves is to actually dua. فإن قلت فأخبرنا ما حقيقة التوكل وحكمه وما يلزم العبد فيه من أمر رزق. So then Imam al-Ghazali says, if you were to ask me to explain to you what is the reality of tawakkul and the ruling, the legal ruling of it, and what is it that is incumbent upon the slave with respect to rizq. This is related to Jamil's question last time. What exactly is the meaning of tawakkul in relation to our rizq? فاعلم أنه يتبين لك هذا في 4 فصول. Know that this matter will become clear to you through 4 aspects. بيان لفظة التوكل وموضعه وحده وحسنه. I must explain to you the actual linguistic meaning of tawakkul. The mawda' is like the context that it comes in, or it is used in, the definition of it, and the hasnihi here means Hasan here means literally it means the fortress, but what it means is what will keep you in a state of tawakkul. How do you guard yourself in this state, and so on. فأما اللفظة فإنما هي توكل تفعل من الوكالة. So first of all, just the sort of form of the word, in terms of its etymology or sarf, is from the form tafa'ul. For those people who study Arabic will recognize the 5th form, verbal noun. From the root wakala. And wakala is to appoint someone as an agent, or to appoint someone as a trustee. To trust someone. If you appoint an agent, I mean you trust them. You go and purchase something for me or do some business for me. He becomes your wakil. So trust is contained within that. You're not going to give someone wakala unless you trust them. in the fiqh, in Sharia, any contract that a person can themselves carry out, you can appoint a wakil as well. Any contract, including marriage, divorce, and so on. فالمتوكل على أحد هو الذي يتخذه بمنزلة الوكيل القائم بأمره. So the one who is mutawakkil, the mutawakkil is the one who appoints the wakil or trusts him. Yeah. الضامن لإصلاحه. الضامن لإصلاحه. الكافي له من غير تكلف واهتمام فهذه جملة. Yeah, so this person that you trust, he's going to take responsibility for your to do good in the thing you have trusted him in, and he will be fulfill his obligations towards you. وأما الموضع فاعلم أن التوكل اسم مطلق في ثلاثة مواضع. As for the context that this word is used in, he says no, that this is used in 3 different places. أحدها في موضع القسمة. The first is in the context of qisma. Qisma is what has been apportioned for you. What has been apportioned for you. وهي ثقة بالله تعالى بأنه لا يفوتك ما قسم لك وقسم لك فإن حكمه لا يتبدل فهذا واجب بالسمع. The first is that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has appointed or apportioned for you, this will never this will never lose you, or you will never lose that. And the ruling or the decision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can never be changed. And he says this is wajib, this type of tawakkul is wajib. Bisama' means through what we know from revelation, from the Quran and the Hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ in Sahih Hadith have mentioned clearly some of these matters, yeah, that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has apportioned for you will never really, not get to you. As Imam al-Nawawi mentioned the 40 Hadith, if all of man and all of jinn were to get together to help you to do something that Allah has not decreed for you, they will never be able to get that thing. And if all of mankind and all of jinn were to get together to try to prevent something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for you, they will never be able to prevent it. It's a very powerful hadith which is sahih, and many other of that nature as well, indicating, that what Allah has apportioned for us in terms of, events or tribulations or whatever, blessings, no one can change. No one can change. Now there is another hadith, because now once again we come into that that slippery slope of free will and qadr, okay? So there's another hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said that the dua can change the qadr. Dua can change the qadr. So this is to teach us that we should make dua. We shouldn't also just think everything is already predetermined. What's the point of making dua? What's the point of doing anything? What's the point of trying, in other words? So that's what that hadith teaches us. And the way the ulama just join between the different meanings of that is that there's two levels of qadr. One is in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, which is the ultimate guarded tablet, which is mentioned in the Quran. Lawh al-Mahfuz, the guarded tablet. But then there's another level which is in the, as mentioned in several hadith, that every year Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down the instructions for the rizq to the malaika. And people often attribute that to Laylatul Bara'a, the night of the 15th of Sha'ban, where everything that will be happening for the following year is the instructions are given to malaika, that so-and-so gets the rizq, so-and-so is going to die, etc. So the ulama, they said, if you make dua, the meaning that the rizq or the qadr can change is that those instructions on the first heaven, they can change. But in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, it was already written that this person would make dua and that would change. But that's just been it's been stated in that way to make it easier for people to understand. Okay. وثاني في موضع النصرة. The second context of tawakkul is in that to do with nusra, meaning victory from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وهو الاعتماد والوثاقة بنصر الله عز وجل لك إذا نصرته وجاهدته. This is to have the full reliance and the full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will give us victory and help us if we help Him, meaning if we struggle and strive for His sake and for His deen. Yeah. Why do we have this full faith that He will help us? Because as Imam al-Ghazali mentioned in the ayah of Quran here, إِن تَنْصُرُوا اللَّهَ يَنْصُرْكُمْ. إِن تَنْصُرُوا اللَّهَ يَنْصُرْكُمْ. In Surah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ayah number 7, very clearly states this jumla shartiyya: if you help Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will help you. It means if you help, struggle and strive for His deen, for His cause, then He will help you. There's no doubt about that, and there's no other way that it can be read or interpreted. It's a definite statement. If you do this, then you will get help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another ayah of Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِن تَصْبِرُوا وَتَتَّقُوا وَيَأْتُوكُم مِّن فَوْرِهِمْ هَذِهِ يُمْدِدْكُمْ رَبُّكُم بِخَمْسَةِ آلَافٍ مِّنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ مُصَوِّمِينَ. If you have sabr, in tasbiru, وَتَتَّقُوا, and you have taqwa. So these are the two conditions. You have to have sabr, patience, and taqwa. Not be indulging in major sins, in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the two conditions. If you have patience and you have taqwa, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will definitely help you. And it says in the ayah, if they attack you, the enemy, all of a sudden, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you with 5,000 angels. Musawwimin means the angels they have their marked targets. Musawwimin, they know who their targets are. So this is very clear in the Quran, that if we fulfill certain conditions, then the victory or the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes. And if you look at the Sahaba, you see at what level of taqwa and what level of sabr they had to have, and when the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came. And this was once I heard one Shaykh mentioning this, in the Battle of Khandaq. You know, the Ghazwatul Khandaq was the point where the full victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came for the Sahaba. In the sense that after that they conquered Mecca, and the Muslims were victorious after that. They were never defeated. Before that they had been given victory in Badr, but they had been given a setback in Uhud. And now the Battle of Khandaq took place, where the Quraysh were bringing all of their resources. They were gathering all of their allies from around Arabia. So all tribes from around Arabia were coming against the Muslims in Medina. And the Quraysh said, we just want to go to Medina, we're going to finish them once and for all. So this battle gives us a real lesson, the level of sabr and the level of taqwa that was required. Because this was a very, very difficult, Medina was put under siege for many days. So there was nothing able to go in and out. And it was very difficult for the Sahaba that were there to defend the town of Medina. And by the end of the battle, which it didn't actually develop into a full conflict, because in the end Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his victory and sent these very sandstorm and things like that. And the Quraysh and the Arabs, they just became fed up and they lost their heart, and also there were rumors that were infiltrated into their camp as well by the Prophet ﷺ. So they left without fighting in the end, but there were minor skirmishes throughout those days when the place was under siege. The point was though, at the end, the Sahaba were so exhausted at the end of that siege. They had come just before the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came. And they didn't know that night the Arabs had all left. So the Prophet ﷺ, he gathered the Sahaba and he was saying to them, which of you will go to look at the state of the enemy for me? And none of them volunteered. None of them volunteered. So he asked them again, who will go and check the state of the enemy? None of them volunteered. So just showing, that these people, the Sahaba who would do anything for the Prophet, willingly lay down their life for him, that was a state of complete exhaustion that they had come to by the end of that, siege of Medina, that none of them felt that they could step forward to do this. You see what I mean? And then finally, on the third time, he said, who will go and check the state of the enemy, and for him will be Jannah. And still no one stepped forward because of their severe just exhaustion at that point of time. We can't even imagine what level. And all he was asking to do was just to go and see the state of the enemy, not to go and fight them or anything like that. And then finally he then got Mu'adh ibn Jabal and rubbed his back. And he said, when he did that, I felt all the strength come back to me. And then he sent him to go and see their state. So then that's when the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came for the Muslims. So that was the level that they had gone to. So in tasbiru, if you have patience. So those people who want the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's important for us to also recognize it's not going to come without having that level of sabr. Because the Quran is telling us this. In another ayah it says, أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَن تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُمْ مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ مَسَّتْهُمُ الْبَأْسَاءُ وَالضَّرْآءُ وَزُلْزِلُوا حَتَّى يَقُولَ الرَّسُولُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ مَتَى نَصْرُ اللَّهِ أَلَا إِنَّ نَصْرَ اللَّهِ قَرِيبٌ. Did you think that you would enter Jannah when the example of those who went before you has not yet come to you? The example of those who went, in other words, the same sunnah that have gone before will always be repeated. Look at the believers before us in different communities, what they had to go through before the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came. That's what the Quran is all full of. It's always full of these stories of previous prophets and what they went through in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah says, do you think you will go to Jannah when this example has not happened to you? You haven't experienced this. مَسْأَتْهُمُ الْبَأْسَاءُ وَالدَّرْعَاءُ. Great tribulation and hardship came to them. وَزُلْزِلُوا, and they were shaken. حَتَّى يَقُولَ الرَّسُولُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ مَتَى نَصْرُ اللَّهِ. Until the point came to such a breaking point that the messenger, the Rasul, and those who believe with him, they all said, when will the victory of Allah come? Yeah? So imagine that, that point of hardship that they get to, where they actually start saying, وَيَقُولَ الرَّسُولُ, even the Rasul himself, they start saying, مَتَى نَصْرُ اللَّهِ, when will the victory of Allah come? أَلَا إِنَّ نَصْرَ اللَّهِ قَرِيبٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, is not the victory of Allah very close? It's very close. It's very close in the eye of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? So this is the situation we have to understand. If we want the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but are we prepared to go through those hardships and that sabr to get that victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? As you know, when once in Mecca, one of the Sahaba, they came and complained to the Prophet ﷺ about the tortures and oppression they were undergoing from Quraysh, and he told them off. He said to them, look, before you there were people that were thrown into deep pits, and their bodies were ripped apart by iron combs, and still they had patience in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. So for those people who call for Islamic State or things like that, they have to realize before that comes about, there has to be a sabr that needs to take place, and there has to be a taqwa that needs to take place. In tasbiru wa tattaqu. And this is why Sayyidina Umar and others, they used to always say to the armies they sent out, make sure none of you committing major sins. Make sure none of you are committing major sins. Because that's the other condition, you have to have taqwa. If people are committing major sins, the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not promised to us. And major sins are things like backbiting, lying, all of these things. So that's في موضع النصرة. قال الله تعالى فإذا عزمت فتوكل على الله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, when you decide upon something, then trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is quite important as well. The ayah says, فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. This was to do, I was actually addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this ayah. It was after, it was telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just be easy with them, the Sahaba. فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ, forgive them. They had, I can't remember the exact incident now, but there was an incident, okay? It may have been, I can't remember if it was the same incident, but there was an incident in Battle of Uhud when the Prophet ﷺ was taking shura with the Sahaba and saying to them, look, my opinion is we should stay in Medina and defend the town. When they heard about the Quraysh coming. But some of the Sahaba who had not been in Badr especially, they were very eager and full of enthusiasm. And they were saying, no, we should go and meet the enemy. Why should we stay here? You know, we're the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we were promised victory, we need to go out and face them. So in their overwhelming enthusiasm for the jihad, they actually, without realizing, they were actually contradicting the Prophet ﷺ's opinion. You know? Because he was saying, we should stay here and defend the town, Medina. And so they started making, no, we should go. And some of them hadn't been in Badr and they were really feeling they'd missed, and they wanted to go and fight against the Quraysh. So the Prophet ﷺ, this is one thing from the Sunnah, whenever he made shura, he would go with what the majority or the body of opinion was, even if it contradicted his own opinion. So he said, fine, we'll do that. And he went into his house, put on his armor and everything, got his weapons, came out of the house. By that time, those younger Sahaba that had been all very enthusiastic, they were feeling remorseful because they realized we contradicted what the Prophet ﷺ was saying. In other words, he had an opinion. We should have obviously trusted in his judgment and his opinion. So then they said to him, look, we're sorry. We made a mistake. We should do what you were saying. But the Prophet ﷺ said, he said that, that's it. He said once a prophet has put on his armor or taken his sword, he doesn't remove it. So once, so that's to do with فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. First you take shura and you deliberate and you weigh up the pros and cons, but once you decide something, then trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. This is important because you see this all the time. People become very uncertain about decisions. So it's an important thing in the Quran just to take on board, because you see these people all the time. People say to me, like, I've done istikhara, but I still can't decide, or I've taken, they've taken shura, they've taken advice from so many people. There's one person, next person, but they still can't decide a certain thing. Here we have to really have trust in Allah. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. When you decide something, just go for it. Just trust in Allah. You've done your istikhara, you've done your shura, you've taken shura with your trusting friends or brothers, taken advice from people of knowledge or whoever you can, and then make a decision and then trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not people of having that, continuing to have that taraddud again and again, then becomes a sign of not having enough trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Especially because the Prophet ﷺ has promised us that if you do istikhara, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will definitely guide you. It's been promised to us. And these hadiths are very strong and come through different Sahaba of the actual dua of istikhara. Because they said the Prophet ﷺ used to teach us this dua like he used to teach us Quran. So it was not something like, many of the hadiths were just something that the Sahaba witnessed or they heard him saying once, and this was then passed down. The istikhara dua is on a much different level than that. Because the hadith itself tell us that the Prophet ﷺ used to teach us this. He used to make us, teach us and memorize us this, like the Quran, like he used to memorize us the Quran. So when we do istikhara, we should have a full certainty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide us. He will guide us to do whatever is best. So then when we make that decision, then just feel fully confident and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever happens now is whatever is decreed for the best. Because we can never know anyway. If we had done the other thing, we'd never know what could have happened. What type of tribulations could have been prevented for us or could have come to us. We never know, anything can happen. And قال تعالى وكان حقا علينا نصر المؤمنين. A very strong statement in the Quran. وكان حقا علينا نصر المؤمنين. It is incumbent upon us, it is obligatory upon us, meaning upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to help the believers. To help the believers. So the Nusra here is linked to Iman. Once again, as in other places in the Quran as well. وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. In another ayah which was revealed after the Battle of Uhud. Do not وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. Do not be disheartened and do not be sad. You will be on top if you are believers. أَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. You will be on top of them. Don't worry about Uhud, what happened in Uhud. This was simply a test for you. وَمَا أَصَابَكُمْ يَوْمَ الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ فَبِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Whatever happened to you on that day when the two armies met, it was simply by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very clear in the Quran. So that He may test you, He may know who are true believers. Because it's easy to be a believer when you're in victory all the time. It's hard to be a believer when things going against you, and when you get suffering defeat. So that's all it was. It was a test to see who are true believers. The Quran is very clear about that. So هذا واجب بالوعد. So trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's victory is wajib. For us, has been established just now from the Quran. والثالث في موضع الرزق والحاجة بأن الله تعالى متكفل بما يقيم بنيتك لخدمته وتتمكن به من عبادته. قال الله تعالى ومن يتوكل على الله فهو حسبه. The third context of the tawakkul is to do with the rizq and haja, to do with our provision and our needs, our basic needs as a human being. Basic needs as a human being is of food, clothing and shelter. Basic needs of a human being, food, clothing and shelter. And in the fiqh they add a fourth category, but that's for purposes of fiqh, is transport, which means, in other words, those basic needs that you don't have to pay zakat upon. The money that is set aside for those basic needs, there's no zakat to be paid upon that. So this is another place where we trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our basic needs as a human being. Because why? As He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to worship Him. So He is the Rabb, we're the servant, and the Rabb always takes care of the slave in terms of his basic needs.
You know, Sheikh, last week we talked about provisions. I don't want to digress, but our understanding is that if someone committed a bank robbery and walked away with £50,000, that provision, if he didn't do a bank robbery, he still would have earned 50,000. He still would have acquired 50, but he chose to do it in the haram way.
You could look at it like that. What do you think, Jamil?
Well, that's the
about this very deeply.
Well, that's the question from last week, isn't it? This is the point I was saying when I read this one. The third point seems to say, okay, what you need in order to basically be alive and to maintain your life, so that you can live bothered. But the first point seems to imply another thing, which is the destiny, what is being destined for you, which is like, you know, this, I don't know, but there seems to be an overlap, isn't it, between.
Yeah.
So that's the £50,000 is not obviously what you need to stay alive. That's just food and clothing. So this is a question in the context of, should we bother working very hard? Should we bother trying to, you know, why shouldn't we just do the minimum work in order to eat and drink and say that Allah will give us what will give us? Maybe it will come with inheritance or a gift or something, you know.
No, but that my question is slightly different because even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us if Yawm al-Qiyamah starts, if you're sowing a seed, you finish sowing it, and there's nothing bigger in our lives that's going to be than the judgment. So we're commanded to carry on doing what we need to do. But my question was to do with the provisions that if everything's already blown in, it's at the time when we were in our wombs. But whatever we're going to acquire. So it's us that we choose to whether we acquire it in a halal way or a haram way. That's.
I think I'll go along with that, definitely. Yeah. I think that makes sense in what you're saying.
I mean, the context is it doesn't really matter because you don't know what you're going to get anyway.
Exactly.
That's the whole point. So the
what's
point
your
is
choice is whether you're going to do it halal or haram,
Yeah.
isn't it? So that's a valid statement, I
But
think.
when it comes, that's a discussion about halal and haram. Shall I do a haram action or halal action? What about choice between two halal actions? What shall I do? And sometimes if it's not, because somebody could say you spend most of your life doing ibadat and dawah work and other things and don't do much work.
Yeah.
And then your basic provision is guaranteed. That seems to be a pretty reliable position. And then other people may say that, my wife needs a dishwasher or she needs a washing machine, otherwise she's having to do a lot of washing and stuff, and we need X, Y, Z things. We need a reliable car, otherwise this happens and we get stuck in the motorway, etc. So people might be thinking that, and they may feel that these are basic things that people need, and in order to get those basic things, I should do more work because that's the way that Allah subhanahu has generally decreed that the rizq will come. So it's those decisions that are more relevant in terms of defining, change.
I think that's true. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. It's to do with how much you're going to work for more acquisition of dunyawi things, or how much you're going to work for your akhirah. I think it's more to do with that. Because it depends what you define as basic needs as well, and things like that, Because people may see things differently. Some people may live very simply, and then they can get accustomed to that, and some people may live more different lives as well.
But the needs of I understand that the need what is considered basic living in the society in which you're living, that's basic living, which is different in a village in Bangladesh compared to if you're living here. Your basic needs, you need some kind of accommodation, you need a car, you need, I think most people who live here, they have those basic things that I would consider luxuries in another place, But
Well, I mean, even here you'll see people living different level. Like I've seen some shuyukh here, in this country. They live in very simple situation, So they'll have a very basic. You see, their house is not full of very expensive furniture, or they don't have a very expensive car. They might have a basic car, or they may not even have that big a house, which you might think, oh, actually that's quite small for the number of people in their family. They may not have very nice sort of expensive foods or things like that. You see what I mean? There are can be very different levels of sort of luxury that you're involved in.
But the question really is, what's the implication of this concept that we're doing now? Because the practical question is, so what should we do, in terms of the rizq and.
I think, like I said last week, I think if people have a choice, should I work for the akhirah and for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or should I be trying to get a better car or a better dishwasher or whatever? They should go for number one, definitely without a doubt, and do it for the akhirah, and get your family to also in that mode that this world is very temporary, it's very short. There's no point getting okay, you've got that size fridge. I know you need a bigger fridge, okay. But, this is just a temporary thing, you're soon going to be moving on into the next world. So the things that we acquire for the next world are going to be permanent, so we have to try to instill that in our families as well. Because that's normally what it is, that type of thing, It's like, I've got a big fridge, but I need one of those big American fridges that have ice that comes out, and it's too much hassle defrosting every month. I have to have one that's frost free, or things like that. That's normally the sort of things that people are talking about. So, in that case, we should work for the akhirah. But like I said, if people have opportunities to earn lots of money, and they sincerely are going to use that money, a certain portion of it, for supporting the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, supporting people who are doing da'wah, supporting institutions of knowledge, supporting da'wah efforts that are going on around the country. Because there is a lot of people that are putting in efforts of da'wah in this country. Yeah? If people are going to work hard and use part of a good proportion of their money to support that, let's say at least 5% of their income, 5 to 10% of their income to support that, then by all means, I would say that's a commendable thing to do. I say 5 to 10% because Imam Zayd used to tell us in America, they have Christians there who give 10% of their salary straight away to their local church. It's like a tax that they have for their local church, 10%. And if Christians can do that for their deen, really as Muslims we should at least be,
The Sikhs give 10% in this country.
Really?
Yeah.
No wonder they're opening these big primary schools and everything. Yeah.
Even in Pakistan, the Qadianis, they give 10%. Even those people.
I think that's a good. I mean, we should make it 11% at least. We're Muslims, you know what I mean? We're Deen al-Haq. This is terrible. Stuff. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq.
I mean,
ask Allah to give me tawfiq first as well to do the same. Anyway, so hopefully that clarifies a little bit about that.
just have a look.
But I think you're right, you can say that, what you said, A person has a choice to do halal or haram. The rizq is, whatever they're going to get is always guaranteed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anyway.
I think, is there not a saying of Imam Abu Hanifa, I read somewhere, that a man stole certain something, and he said, why have you stolen your rizq? Have you heard that?
Yeah, I've heard something similar.
Stolen your rizq. What does that mean?
Meaning that he stole it to get that, but that was destined to him
Oh, I
anyway.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why did you steal it?
Okay, so so the third aspect is just, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's created us to worship and He's ordered us to worship Him, but He didn't order us to acquire our rizq. In the Quran, He actually said He is going to provide for us. So it's quite important to remember that. He ordered us to worship Him, but He didn't order us to acquire our own rizq. But don't become confused. Obviously, working for one's living is ibadah as well. Working to support yourself and your family is ibadah itself, and a very noble thing to do.
Is there some evidence or hadith which mentions about that?
Yeah, there's many things. This is hadith about Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, who always ate from the work of his own hands. And obviously mentioned as a praiseworthy thing. Even though he was made the king of Jerusalem, he always ate from the work of his own hands. There's quite a lot. There are certain books that have chapters on that particular thing, on working for your rizq. I'll try and think of some references if I can. But obviously it's in the Sunnah as well, to trade and things like that. There are quite a few.
The problem, like living in this society, the whole society is centered around materialism and working, and everyone does it. Everyone who lives here does it. So naturally, Muslims are influenced by people who feel that they need those things. They need to work. They need to do more. Whereas it's just very hard to, like you say, if you meet with sheikhs who've got a more balanced view. But it's not very many people to meet who are like that, that can be in your company and you can, but that's a struggle to find that balance, I think.
But again, doesn't that come back to the hadith of Rasulullah? If you hang around a perfume shop, you smell of perfume, and if you hang around a blacksmith, you smell of metal. So again, encouraging you.
There's a lot to do with good company. There are people you can sit with in this country. I've sat with Shaykh Siraj up in Liverpool. I've sat with Shaykh Akram here in Oxford. You see them. They're very much in Zuhud, very much away from the dunyawi things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. This is one of the strongest promises in the Quran that makes us have full faith that if we trust in Allah, then He will take care of us. Literally, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. The one who trusts in Allah, Allah will be sufficient for him. In other words, if we truly do put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in any matter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be sufficient for us. What's lacking from our side is to have that full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once again, this trust, it doesn't just come about by reading about it. Although reading these things, like these ayahs of Quran, obviously they stir it up. They make us realize what it's about. But to actually get to that reality of that, it doesn't come through reading. It comes through what we call mujahada. It comes through actually purifying ourselves, making that struggle. So to come to this stage, He's put it here for a reason after the other 4 stages. To come to this stage of real tawakkul, true tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the level that the victory of Allah will come to us, we have to go through those other stages first. The tawbah, the fighting our lower desires, fighting against the shaitan, telling us to do haram, fighting against the love of the world, taking the love of the world away from our heart, keeping away from bad company. We have to go through those other stages first. Then we will start coming to these higher levels of tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Exactly, yeah. So, good point there. The other ayah,
continuation of that.
وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ, the one who has taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will provide for him in ways that he didn't expect. يَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. He will give him rizq in ways that he couldn't even think of. لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. He wouldn't even have come into his mind. So just showing us that, if we had that true tawakkul, that rizq would definitely come to us. It could come from ways we never expected. And people, you can see this, if you trust in Allah, you see it happen in your life. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not like these idols that people worship. Someone bukmun umyun, blind, deaf and dumb. They don't reply when people. If we ask Allah, He replies. We see this in our lives. It's there for a reason. Why, when you've asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, He's helped you. There's a reason for that. There's a responsibility attached to that as well. وقال الصادق الأمين صلى الله عليه وسلم لو توكلتم على الله حق توكله لرزقكم كما يرزق الطير تغدو خماسا وتروح بطانا. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if you truly trusted in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His, what is befitting to Him, حق توكله, if you had the true trust in Allah, not just the simple, we read about it and now we're saying I trust in Allah. But he's talking about the true. That's why he said haqqa tawakkuli, the true trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That will come through this mujahada of purifying ourselves. He would surely provide for you as He provides for a bird that goes out hungry in the morning and comes out full in the evening. And the Prophet ﷺ lived his life like that as a sunnah for us, as an example. He never slept with any savings in his house. It's well known in the Sunnah any money that had come to him, silver or gold, etc., he wouldn't sleep with that. He would give it away, sadaqah, straight away. So that complete trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was there. You know when Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu, came with all of his wealth and he gave everything, and then the Prophet ﷺ said to him, what did you leave for your family? And he said, I left for them Allah and His Messenger. Not just Allah, but Allah and His Messenger. This is in the Sahih. And that was the way the Sahaba spoke. And it wasn't considered in any way, shape or form shirk. To say that I left for them Allah and His Messenger. This is what the Quran itself often mentions, Allah and His Messenger. Shirk is far away from Muslims. Shirk of that nature is far, far away from Muslims. So we don't have to think about things like that. Well, having said that, there are groups amongst people who claim to be Sufis that do fall probably into shirk in this, which is quite rare, but it does. I have seen that myself. Of people who have misinterpreted some of the writings of great Sufis in the past, and have actually somehow now made the Prophet ﷺ as part of a divine, relationship, which is obviously completely wrong. The Prophet ﷺ is the best of all creation, but he's a creation. He's a creation. No Muslims have ever doubted that, but some ignorant people nowadays have their understanding has become so shallow that they are unable to, just understand basic things. Anyway, so that was Abu Bakr gave everything, so he had the full tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now sometimes people have said to me, should I give everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Actually, just only once ever anyone's asked me that. Most people just never dream of it. And that person, I think, was not really 100% fully on in their senses anyway. But now the thing is, you're not going to do that unless you have the tawakkul that Abu Bakr had. And if you had that tawakkul, you wouldn't be asking me, should I do it? You would just do it. You would have done it by now. So there's no point, saying that. That means you've still got the taraddud. You understand? So Sayyidina Umar came with half of all of his wealth, which is fine. Just do that, give a third or give that 10%, at least beat the Qadiani, give 11%. Give 11%. Don't worry about it. If you don't try to be like Sayyidina Abu Bakr. If you become like him, you will give it anyway. You won't need to ask any shaykh or anyone about it. Inshallah ta'ala, make intention to give 11% of what we have. There was no very enthusiastic Ameens there.
Well, that's because everyone was thinking. Everyone was thinking, is that before tax, after tax? It whittled down to about 50p or something.
Let's look at what these other communities are doing, yeah? Christians, now people are telling me Qadiani, Sikhs even here. I mean, they're taking their salary and they're giving 10%. I don't think it's obviously it's after tax, but not after like, okay, I need that for my Xbox 360 whatever. I need that one. After all that, then I give 10%. No, 10% of what you get. Yeah? 11%. We have to do 11%. وهذا فرض لازم للأب. this trusting in Allah for our daily needs, basic needs of rizq is fard. It's actually fard because it's established from Quran. As last week he mentioned all those ayahs of Quran. بدليل العقل والشرع جميعا. Not just established from the Quran, but also from dalil al-aql, meaning even rationally, it makes. There's 4 types of rizq. Rizq, أربعة أقسام. مضمون, مقسوم, مملوك, موعود. That which is guaranteed, that which is apportioned, that which is owned, and that which is promised. And so the rizq, when we're talking about rizq, we can divide it into 4 different types, categories. That which is guaranteed to us, that which is apportioned for us, that which is owned by us, and that which is promised to us. So he's saying the one that is guaranteed to us is the one that we're talking about more when we're talking about tawakkul. فالمضمون هو الغذاء وهو ما به قوام البنية دون سائر الأسباب. فالضمان من الله تعالى لهذا النوع. The first one is the one which is guaranteed, which is our basic sustenance, our nourishment, our food and drink, etc. And that which we need to maintain ourselves, our life, our strength, etc. And this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed to us. وَالتَّوَكُّلْ يَجِبُ بِإِزَائِهِ بِدَلِيلِ الْعَقْلِ وَالشَّرْعِ. Having complete trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide us this basic nourishment and sustenance is something that is obligatory upon us by Sharia and by Aql. When they say Sharia, they mean Quran and Sunnah. لأن الله تعالى كلفنا خدمته وطاعته بأبداننا فضمن ما يسد خلل البنية لنقوم بما كلفنا. Once again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us to worship Him and to obey Him, and He has guaranteed to give us that basic sustenance that we need to carry that out. وقال بعض مشايخ الكرامية كلاما حسنا على أصله. So he says then the Karamiyya, this sect, that was a sect at the time of Imam al-Ghazali or before him. He says, so one of the shuyukh, he made a good point in its asl, although he doesn't agree with the details of it. إن ضمان أرزاق العباد واجب في حكم الله تعالى لثلاثة أشياء. So these Karamiyya, they said that the guarantee that all of the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will get their basic sustenance is wajib in the hukm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 3 reasons. And Imam al-Ghazali rejects the use of the word wajib with relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala afterwards, if we see the discussion. However, he agrees with the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed the rizq. But to use the word wajib, he doesn't agree with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because what Ahl-Sunnah, they say, no one can make something obligatory upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's only that Allah has put it upon Himself. He has guaranteed and put it upon Himself. Because it's not that there is some external factor that can make it wajib upon Him. أحدها أنه سيد ونحن العبيد وعلى السيد كفاية مؤنة العبيد كما أن على العبد خدمة السيد. I think we mentioned this point before. The first thing they said was that he's the master, we're the slaves, and the master always takes care of his slaves. And the slave has to serve the master. والثاني أنه خلقهم محتاجين إلى الرزق. The second point is وَلَمْ يَجْعَلْ لَهُمْ سَبِيلًا إِلَى طَلَبِهِ إِذْ لَا يَدْرُونَ مَا هُوَ رِزْقُهُمْ. وأين هو مات هو ليطلبوه بعينه من مكانه وفي وقته ليصلوا إليه فوجب أن يكفيهم أمر ذلك ويوصلهم إليه. The second point the Karamiya made, they said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made people and they need the rizq, they need their sustenance, but He hasn't told them or indicated to them exactly where that sustenance is to be sought. And I think what they're meaning here is that the precise sustenance that is for that person, for that particular person, we don't know. So, when we go out to work, we may take different avenues to try to get rizq. We don't know exactly where the rizq has been placed for us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept that hidden from us. So therefore, they say wajaba and yakfiyahum. So they said therefore it's obligatory upon him to provide this rizq. Slightly obscure argument, I think. وَالثَّالِث أَنَّهُ كَلَّفَهُمْ الْخِدْمَةِ. How did you guys translate that in English?
What?
Second one.
Second one. He said, Exalted Allah has made the creatures needy of sustenance, but has not appointed any definite ways for searching for their sustenance. As such, it is necessary that Exalted Allah should take the responsibility for sustenance, as He has very kindly taken the responsibility to provide for His creatures their sustenance and other necessaries of life.
I think that's the meaning what I just explained. The third, He has made human beings responsible to serve Him. وَطَلَبُ الرِّزْقِ شَاغِلٌ عَنْهَا. If they then have to go around looking for their sustenance, this is going to distract them and preoccupy them from doing what they were created to do, which is to serve Him. فَوَجَبَ أَنْ يَكْفِيَهُمَ الْمُؤْنَةَ لِيَتَفَرَّغُوا لِلْخِدْمَةِ. So this is another reason why it's then obligatory that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or incumbent upon Allah, to take care of this aspect for them so that they can engage themselves in His worship. And then Imam Ghazali says, وَهَذَا كَلَامًا لَمْ يُحِّطْ بِأَسْرَارِ الرُّبُوبِيَّةِ. Imam Ghazali says, this statement of the Karamiya indicates that they have not really understood in depth the secrets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes. Why? Because they said that it's wajib upon Him. وَالْقَائِلُ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ أَنَّ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَاجِبٌ تَائِهٌ. Anyone who says that there is something wajib upon Allah is ta'ih. He's someone who is astray. وَقَدْ أَوْضَحْ. Also the Mu'tazila also fell into that, The Mu'tazila, the sort of ultra-rational strand within early Islam that were very influenced by Greek philosophy and became sort of ultra-rationalists. They also said this, that it's wajib upon Allah to do whatever is most correct at all times. It's wajib upon Allah to do whatever is most correct, aslah. Yeah. Well, once again, the Ahl Sunnah, they said, no, we can't say that it's wajib upon Allah. Allah could do good or evil, but we know that He only does good. He has put it upon Himself.
They
There's nothing
exaggerate.
to force Allah. There's nothing to make it obligatory upon Him.
They project humans' perception of good and bad and enforce that on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they say that a wicked person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obliged to punish him or her.
Yes.
And a good person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obliged to reward him or her. And our position is that Allah can do whatever He wants, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is na'uzu billah, far removed from lying. And if He promises something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honour it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not obliged by our projections of what we deem. And that was the cause for Imam Ash'ari to go against his teacher when he asked him a question about the three boys. He said if the three brothers are born and one dies as a child and doesn't go heaven or hell, because that's what they had this concept of purgatory, and then the second brother, he lives to adulthood and he ends up in Jahannam, and the third one goes to Jannah. He says he asked his teacher, who was his uncle, and he said to him that if the older one is rewarded with heaven because of his good deeds, he says that the older one who is punished because of his bad deeds for hell, what if he says to Allah, why didn't you let me die as a child as well, so I'd get saved from hellfire? And then he couldn't answer that question, and then he went out of the Mu'tazilite creed.
Good. Yeah, that's the other thing they also said was wajib as well. That Allah has to punish sins and has to reward people. It's an interesting story actually. Yeah. Okay, so what was the answer then? What was the answer?
He couldn't answer it.
What was the Ahl Sunnah position, or what was Ash'ari's then?
He didn't explain. He didn't explain it.
وهذا كلام فقد أوضحنا في فن الكلام فساده. He said, Imam al-Ghazali says, I've explained in other books to do with kalam, aqidah, the incorrectness of this particular idea. وَلَنَرْجَعْ إِلَى الْمَقْصُودِ مِنْ غَرَضِنَا. So let's go back to what we were on. So let's not deviate too much into aqidah, in other words. وَأَمَّا رِزْقَ الْمَقْصُومِ. The second, so that was rizq madmoon, that is the one that is guaranteed to us. The rizq that is guaranteed. The second one is the rizq which is apportioned to us. Apportioned. وهو ما قسمه الله سبحانه وكتبه على اللوح في اللوح المحفوظ. This is whatever Allah has decreed for us and apportioned for us in our life. Like we said, when the ruh is put into the baby in the womb, the rizq is written there. Yeah, so this is that type. ما يأكله ويشربه ويلبسه كل واحد بمقدار ووقت ومؤكد. Everything that we will eat, drink, any clothes that we will ever have in our whole life has already been written in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, in the tablet, the guarded tablet where everything is written that will ever happen. لا يزيد ولا ينقص. It never increases or decreases. So we already explained the meaning of the hadith, that the dua can change the qadar. It means not in the Lawh al-Mahfuz but in the first heaven. ولا يتقدم ولا يتأخر عما كتب بعينه. Nothing can be delayed and nothing can be hastened. And the Quran says for every ummah there is a time appointed. It can never be delayed. It can never be hastened. Every ummah. This ummah now, it will end. Yeah? This situation we're in now, it will end. There's a time appointed. It can't be delayed, it can't be brought forward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best that time. كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الرزق مقسوم مفروخ منه ليس تقي بزائد ولا فجور فاجر من ناقصه. In this hadith the Prophet ﷺ said the rizq is apportioned. It's all apportioned. It's mafruh minhu. This is something that is completed. The matter is completed. It's been apportioned. It's been written. No person of taqwa can change it, and no person who is unrighteous can change it. So that's in the famous hadith of Jibreel, and tu'minu bil qadar khayrihi wa sharrihi. That's what it means by qadar. We believe in the qadar. Qadar literally in Arabic means to measure something. To measure something, What's the qadr of this book? How many centimeters is it? So what that means is, qaddara in the second form, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has measured everything out. He's measured out, all the rizq that each person is going to get. Everything is already measured to a precise amount. Our lifespans, our wealth, our number of children, the number of raindrops that will fall on the ground, the number of leaves that will fall from the trees, everything is exactly and precisely known. The third one, al-Mamluk. The third category of rizq is that which is owned or possessed by us. فما يملكه كل واحد من أموال الدنيا على حسب ما قدر الله تعالى وقسم له أن يملكه وهو من رزق الله تعالى. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed and destined that we will own in our lives, this is what we will own. قال تعالى أنفقوا مما رزقناكم. It says in the Quran, spend from that which we have given you, which we have given, the rizq we have given you. Spend from that. So in other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us that, and He then told us to spend from it. You know. In other words, مَمَّا مَلَّكْنَاكُمْ. He has given us this as a possession. There are possessions within this world. Our milk. Really everything is a possession of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Question. You know, so what's guaranteed versus what's decreed. Can you just explain that difference?
There's not really much difference.
It's not difference, right?
Yeah.
It's just
It's talking about two different, in a way it's talking about two different things, but like you said, there's an overlap. So what's guaranteed is our basic sustenance, you know, that we need to carry on our life and be alive and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What has been decreed for us is everything. Everything is decreed. Whether you're going to be a millionaire or you're not going to be a millionaire, it's all decreed. You see what I mean? So it's sort of slightly two different things, but obviously the second one encompasses the first.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah, the second one encompasses the first.
This seems to be the answer to the question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the answer, isn't it? Yeah, finally got the answer. Yes, Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah is amazing, you know, he is amazing the way he explains all of these things and breaks it down.
Is it his categorization than this?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not be, but I haven't read all the books that came before him, but it's quite likely that it is. Because obviously he was very pioneering in all of these different disciplines as well. And it is very much his style to really, really get to the core of things and really, explain them and break them down. But it is possible, so he might, he obviously had teachers as well. So then, the fourth one is the mamluk, the one that you've been given, that Allah has given you to then spend for. وَأَمَّا الْمَوْعُودِ, the fourth one is maw'ud, the one that we've been promised. فَهُوَ مَا وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْمُتَّقِينَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ بِشَرْطِ التَّقْوَى حَلَالًا مِنْ غَيْرِ كَدٍّ. قال الله تعالى ومن يتق الله يجعل له مخرجا ويرزقه من حيث لا يحتسب. This is what Dr. Faris mentioned this ayah earlier. This is a particular category, and once again it comes under number 2, which is qadar. Everything is by qadar anyway, but it's a particular category. You could draw this as one of those diagrams, with circles, if you wanted to. Number 2 is going to cover everything, isn't it? Yeah. So some of these circles are going to be within that. These are particular. This is a particular type of rizq that Allah has promised the people who have taqwa, specifically. Yeah. He has promised the people who have taqwa specifically. And He has said that they will get this even without having to work for it. It's a promised in the Quran. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ, the one who has taqwa of Allah, He will make for him a way. يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا, a way out. Makhraj is a way out. So if you're in a hardship, you've got debt, so there's certain things that you don't know how I'm going to get out of this. Yeah? If you have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا, He will make a way out for that person. So see, you hear, it's linked to, you have to have taqwa. You have to be not in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any major sins. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ, and He will provide for him in ways that he never expected. You know? Happened to me the other day. I'm not saying I was a person of taqwa, but it happened to me the other day. I was provided in ways I never expected. A letter came through the door, and it was the Inland Revenue, saying that they have taken too much tax from me, and they're giving me back £1,300. So it can happen. Most unexpected thing ever.
You better calculate 11% of that.
Inshallah ta'ala. So anyway, just, the point is then things can happen in ways that you never expect, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised this for the people of taqwa. فهذه أقسام الرزق. These are the 4 categories of rizq. والتوكل إنما يجب بإيذاء المضمون منها فاعلم ذلك. Tawakkul, we specifically refer to the first one, which is that which has been guaranteed, that our basic daily sustenance is linked to tawakkul. Should we see what's the time? Quarter past? Should we stop there, inshallah ta'ala? جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أهله جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أهله جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أهله سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. We stay for tea, inshallah.